songs and not the girl. So they were not, they were the counterparts of the men, okay? The men, many of them were married. They were not all single, fooling around. They were married. They had the wife, the kids at home. And at night, they would go and walk on the wild side. So it was a very wild world. It was not very political astute or anything. There's a very interesting song, "A Bum Died," "Ένας αλήτης πέθανε," which basically says that, you know, there's this bum that has died in the park and nobody's interested in him, and what a pity this is. And the reason for all this is that we have a criminal society. It's not that we have a criminal bourgeoisie. It's society is bad. So it's not a Marxist attitude, but it is an anti-establishment attitude. Since I talked about the Marxist thing, I should say also that there has been a strong Marxist element in Greece, of course. But the Marxists have always been careful with their betas because of hashish, for one thing. The whole idea being that those who enjoy themselves with a drug are not angry enough to fight the enemy, because the whole thing is based on an emotional outburst. It's anger-based politics. One can argue that there is a more level-headed place from where to start your politics. You don't have to be very angry, but it's understandable that if somebody is having a good time, getting his drugs and getting his sex and all that, the last thing in his mind is to go and risk his life for a political cause. So you get a lot of conflict there. Of course, Sotiria Bellou is an exception, the famous singer that was also a left-wing sympathizer and suffered for it. But that's the exception. The others, not the others, but most of the others, were sort of indifferent to the left-wing cause. And they were basically hedonists who didn't exploit anybody because they didn't exploit the way the ruling classes exploit, because they didn't have power to do so. But it is very questionable if a Marxist or a Rebetist got power. I doubt that the one would be wiser than the other in handling that power without abusing it. I think that possibly the Rebetist might be better because he would be so busy trying to find good times for himself that don't cost very much, that he might even abuse power less. It's the first time I'm formulating this thought, but
perhaps his experience as a elitis or as a bum of sorts, he might have that empathy with the lumpen proletariat that a Marxist has never had.
Yeah, because most of the Marxists never have doubted the essential assumptions of the psyche that their parents have transmitted to them, i.e., gather, save, protect yourself, all of those things. You see, they've never seen the street. They've never been floating about like the bum has.
We have a theory working here.
I don't know. Yeah, we can write a new book anytime. Let's start tomorrow.
So what has become of the Rebetis and what has become of Rebetica? Is it remained apolitical? Has it changed as an art form? Because we've been speaking, I guess, about the beginnings of the music in the 20s and 30s.
Well, many things happened. First of all, the laws against the drugs started becoming harsher and harsher, even against the songs. Even the songs were not allowed during the Metaxas dictatorship in the 30s. So life became more and more difficult.
Why?
Why? I really don't have an explanation for that, except for the explanation that there is a metaphysical terror toward all mind-altering substances except alcohol, possibly because, you see, this is true also in this culture. People don't see alcohol as a drug, probably because Jesus Christ used to drink. And it's very hard to go against your man. On top of it, Greece had a very long tradition of wine, but I must tell you that there was a very important tradition of putting water in your wine in classical Greece. That showed intelligent drinking as opposed to ridiculous drinking. Okay. So anyway, of course, hashish was a little bit connected with Turkey, and because the Turks were particularly enamored with it, and because they had occupied Greece for so long, there might be some of that. And I think the most important thing is that people should not have fun. Essentially, people should not have fun. People should work. People should be righteous. People should do the right things. But ecstasy, in modern Greece anyway, ecstasy has been looked down upon. I think this is what created harsher and harsher laws. Even in the end of the previous century, there were laws against it. Not in all of Greece. Not in the Greece that was still under Turkish rule. Thessaloniki, for example, was liberated in this century. And in Greece, in Thessaloniki, the laws were not there for a long time. But in the other areas, Austrian prince, who was Otto, the king. So they brought their mentality that they wanted to build Greece on coffee and alcohol. And I personally believe that the songs composed when the Rebetes were smoking hashish are sometimes very, very good, and it might be attributed to the influence of the drug. And the Tsitsanis, for example, and Vambakaris both gave it up.
They both had smoked.
They both were smokers early on, and in fact, Tsitsanis' best man was a police chief from Thessaloniki who was kind to hashish smokers, and that's why he made him his best man, is because to show his appreciation of the Rebetes toward his more humanistic policy. So Tsitsanis stopped, and so did Vambakaris, and I'm telling you, the music that they produced afterwards were not as good. Now, there were other people who never smoked and always produced good music. So it's very hard to say. It's very hard to say. There was also a minority of heavier drugs, but always a minority in those days. Cocaine and opium. And I don't know the situation with heroin exactly, but there was that kind of stuff too. But now there's much more heroin in Greece now, and much less hashish in Greece now. See what has happened to Greece? Like, you look at these Rebetes, the druggies. If you look at Greece now Greece is into dangerous drugs, including lots of heroin and even crack. Okay, in those days, the majority of what we mean by drugs was the plant, the hashish, and for most people it stopped there. So I suppose that people always need some substance, unless you're, consorting with the deities, and you get, the universal high all the time, which is a very wonderful way to get high. But everybody needs ecstasy. Everybody needs to come out of the ordinary mind, because the ordinary mind, after a while, is a little boring. And the ways that I know of are either those substances, or lots of dancing, or mysticism. Mysticism, very few people see anything there. Dancing is a very good one. Perhaps sports. And if you go anywhere beyond that, what you find is alcohol and plants and
cigarettes,
coffee, all those things. So the rebetes were not like a big, monstrous drug-taking culture more than, anything else. It's just that their drug of choice did not meet the approval of the status quo at the time. And of course the status quo was drunk on the legal alcohol. And of course was coffeeed up and nicotined up all the time, except that those were fine. So that's the situation of the hashish, and many of them really paid very dearly for their hashish habit. I mean, great talents were lost because of that. At some point, the whole of Rebetiki Musiki plus the music plus the instruments and everything was totally forbidden. To own a bouzouki was like owning a bad weapon or something. Terrible that way.
So you mentioned dancing. Does that play a role in the Rebetiko culture?
Oh yes. It's very funny when I've seen the rock concerts here. What you see is that the performers do all the dancing, and the audience essentially stands, and all they do is they wave their hands, applauding. And what you have in the Rebetiki situation is that the performers are totally motionless. They sit on a raised platform on very simple chairs, most of them made of straw. And they have their instruments and they play like that, and they look at the audience like zombies, I mean, of course, there is some expression in the face and everything, but nobody ever stands up to go to the audience, to project, to perform, to grab the audience. I like that dignity, and it reminds me of the dignity of the folk dances. You see, there's this dignity in the folk dance too, that you don't throw yourself out to be loved. You are there, you are integral, and if they like you, they'll find out about you. But you don't go to them, they must come to you. So there's that in the performance, and then of course people dance. People do all the dancing, and what we have is a number of dances. Tsifteteli and Zembekiko, Hasaposerbiko and Hasapiko, those were the Karsilamas.
Can you just tell me about the Zembekiko? What is that?
Yeah, the Zembekiko is a dance that is supposed to be danced by one person at a time. I mean, you can have 3 or 4 people dancing together, but they don't grab each other. There's no duet or circle dancing or anything like that. No line dancing. And it has an uneven beat. And because it has an uneven beat, it has a point in the beat in which you almost fall, and then you go back to the normal. And it has, for me, the psychological significance of the semi-falling and then getting up again. It's very, very strong, as opposed to something that does not have that slight hesitation or falling. Something more straightforward, like Hasapiko.
So it sort of goes through, every time it repeats the 9 bars, it has this moment of sort of climax or... and so forth, yeah. There's one missing at some point, so it's 4, 5, and 4. So it's not 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, like Hasapiko is. So that extra beat does the trick. And where's the music now? The Rebetiko music.
How
is it now?
Yeah, the music was very... originally the music was drawing from Greek folk, i.e. the music of the villages a little bit, and from Greek church music, and from Turkish folk music, and from classical Arabic music even. And because it had so many non-Western things coming together, it was sort of Oriental music. Later on, it lost its Oriental character. And one of the reasons that happened was that the whole Greek culture, wanted to redefine itself away from Turkish influences. Now, the truth of the matter, of course, is that the Turks, when they came to Asia Minor, that now is called Turkey, they found the Byzantines there. Now, the Byzantine culture taught them a lot to make them the Turks that they were later, because in the beginning they were a different culture. So what the Turkish culture of the 19th century was not the Turkish culture of the Ottoman culture of the 15th century, because it had come to Ionia, okay, another word for Asia Minor. It had been ionized, okay. So it's very hard when you say we want all the Turkish influence out. Hey, part of that is you. Because if you listen to Byzantine music, you say, hey, that sounds very Arabic, that sounds very Turkish. Some people have made records with classical Greek music and it sounds very Japanese, you know. Strange. Anyway, because there was this enmity against anything that could be labeled Turkish, and because the recording of these songs necessitated the cutting away of the famous introductions, the taksimya to the songs.
Why were these famous?
Well, famous to me and my friends, because that's when you get the feeling of you get an atmosphere before you get the beat. That the atmosphere must be established before the beat begins. You don't just go into the beat immediately. That's crass, you know.
So, as they might say in jazz, finding the groove.
Yeah, you got to find the groove. The groove is not waiting there. You got to find it, and the finding of it is very important. And when the recording company started recording, they realized that the song was 6 minutes long, and 2 of the minutes was the introduction. Saying no, we start from the beat, you know. And then they made the song shorter so as to conform to their records. Okay? It's like here, you know, you want to make a good movie, but it's got to be feature length, and then you keep adding bullshit to it just to make it feature, you know, even though the movie could be done in 40 minutes and be a perfect work of art, but 40 minutes is like committing suicide to make a piece for 40 minutes. Nobody wants it. There was that, and then there was, of course, the invasion of the accordion, which only had...
So now the Rebetes are vindicated?
Well, they're vindicated in the sense that many people said, well, there are very good elements in the Rebetes culture, the way it was, except for the drugs. But the drug scene nowadays in Greece is so much worse that, in a sense, they're vindicated because they were not doing that kind of dangerous drugs, and they were happy druggies, if you want to call them druggies, as opposed to these depressed people that you see nowadays in Exarchia and so forth. They're young and wasted, and you know, for all the drugs that they take, you don't even see a smile on their damn faces. You know? So, what else?
Well, is there any way we could get you to sing a song?
To sing a song? I wish it would be nice without instruments. stop because
Sure.
we're wasting. What has happened also is the invasion of the accordion, and the accordion has minor and major scales, but it misses all the microtones that you can produce with the fiddle or the lyre, the lira. So that has influenced the way people sing, because if you don't hear microtones anymore, you don't use them. And we have a lot of singers who went to great extents to sound as Western as possible. Also the bouzouki, from being a bouzouki tuned to the specific Arab maqams, the ways, the basic themes, in the early days, then most people forgot how to play the various maqams, and what you had instead was a bouzouki not tuned to any of those maqams, and at the same time they added more strings just to make it more virtuoso sounding, to be able to do fancy turns and things like that. Never felt a great affinity for of the later part of rebetiko, the archondo rebetiko in the 50s, 40s.
I was thinking about, you mentioned that to me about the microtones, and I was thinking about it yesterday. You can answer this. Does a bouzouki or a baglamas, do they ever bend the note? Do you know what that means?
Yes, they do.
Oh, well then they do produce microtones on the bouzouki.
Yeah, they do, but with a fiddle it's much more visible, that's all. Yeah, much more pronounced, that's all. Of course they do. And so that voice. And some of the rebetika singers, of course, still play a lot with this so-called Oriental style, as if the Byzantine Greek church doesn't have microtonal singing. But then you have a lot of compositions that are totally westernized in the sense that they recognize nothing except major and minor.
And what do you think the microtone adds to the music, or why is it important?
Oh, it makes it melt. It makes it melt. It's like the magic of sitar, as opposed to guitar. Okay, now with guitar you can do things, but most people don't.
Can you give us an example of microtone singing? Do you have a song that would carry that? Doesn't necessarily have to be rebetika.
Well, let me try a rebetiko. Let me try a Karsilama.
Can you tell us a little what the song is before you?
The song is from Constantinople, and it says that there's this. It's a very simple song. It says that a cart with somebody who sells everything, a pramateftis. What do you call that? In the old days there were these carts where you could buy everything. It's like a small Sears. Mm-hmm. Okay, anything but food, shoes, and there's a cart like that passing, and be careful because it produces a lot of dust, and sometimes the drivers steal children. Yeah, that's what it says. And the more oriental way to sing would be Arabas pernas konginete, Arabas pernas konginete, Σηκώς το φουστανάκι σου να μη σκονίζεται, Σηκώς το φουστανάκι σου να μη σκονίζεται. And of course a more Western way would be Arabas perna skoniginete, Arabas perna, and so forth. But because that's too boring, they add the second voice, the accompaniment. And in the early music, you never have that second voice stuff. the difonia, as they call it, which came from Italy through the cantatas of Kerkyra and those islands.
So the solo voice was a very important...
Solo voice, exactly. The whole idea was a solo voice with a lot of microtones rather than double voice without microtones. And that is basically the difference between East and West. And that reflects itself in the development of Rebetica and Neo-Rebetica stuff.
So then the new Rebetica, then, there's a lot less of the microtone in the solo.
Yes. Less and less and less. There are some people like your friend Dalaras, who has kept that up, of course, that type of singing. But mostly in the way songs are played nowadays, you get away from the Oriental and you get more Occidental. But you still use bouzouki. You still use those instruments. And you get a new feeling altogether. So you get the old instruments, but you get a new sensibility. And also the other thing is that you get the instruments electrified. They're not acoustic anymore. And you go to those places to see them perform. And the volume is just unthinkable. You have to wear earplugs to go in there. And the other thing is that you don't anymore have that modest performance. Now the performers are dying to get you. For example, the queen of the light pop of El Afrolaika, which is this westernized bouzouki stuff, Marinella, when she performs, it's like a Las Vegas show. It's toilet and lighting and going to the audience and showering them with emotion and so forth. So it really is very, very different than the early days. And I find it very displeasing, and I don't go to those places at all. Other people, of course, as it turns out, love the stuff, and that's why it's making big bucks. But I will continue hearing the recordings of the old people.
Even the instruments themselves have become much more embellished with mother of pearl and all sorts of...
Oh, the bouzouki, yes.
Whereas I think originally it was just a piece of clear wood. It's sort of become a showpiece instead of...
Yeah, it's very showy. It's very showy now. And the...
to cover up for the absence of content, maybe.
Probably. There's a lot of ability to produce a lot of notes in the... You see, instead of respecting the microtonal thing, now that it's major minor, they produce a lot of notes.
So technicality is
technicality, therefore. So you have to go from here to that. That's considered hot stuff.
This sounds... I see so many parallels in this, including the improvisation element and the changes to electrification and the increase in the number of notes as opposed to the way in which a note is played. The parallels between acoustic, what's known as bebop jazz, into fusion jazz, which is a real corruption of the art form. The music has changed dramatically away from acoustic to very loud, very technical.
And how is that called?
Jazz is now come because you've heard of fusion. Fusion jazz. It's the kind of thing that these very up-tempo bands, more instruments, very showy performance, a lot of moving together with their saxophones, and much louder, much faster, and a complete loss of the very beautiful small quartet where there's none of the showmanship. It's the musicianship that is being appreciated. And it's interesting to feel this connection between the development of Greek music and this essentially urban American music.
There is a
jazz.
sense of despair, I think. I'm here. Have you seen me?
Look at me.
Look at me. It's very look at me. The other thing is, if you don't have the eyes to see, you will never see. It's very, very cut and dry. I'm here, but are you here?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah. σε ανταμώσω κάτω στην ακρογιαλιά. Θα ήθελα να με χοροτάσεις από χάδια και φιλιά. Θα ήθελα να με χοροτάσεις από χάδια και φιλιά.